Is it Cottrell or Cottrell?
Some people say Cottrell.
Which do you prefer? It's
I
your name.
tend to go by Cottrell.
Okay.
But I have relatives who say Cottrell because it's easier.
We'll go with
Because it's
We'll
easy.
go with
Cottrell is
we'll go with Cottrell.
short. Cottrell.
All right, we're all set.
We're on film too?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, we're ready to go. Hey, everybody, we're back at the sports medicine broadcast. That's the way that Jeremy Jackson says it. It's
No, I
sports.
We're going 3, 2.
Oh yeah, hang on. 3,
What's up,
2,
people? Welcome to the
1.
Sports Medicine.
You're reading my script.
Well, I mean,
3,
you can call me
2,
out. I gotta-
1. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the sports medicine broadcast. I'm Dr. Josh Yellen with the University of Houston Master of Athletic Training Program. To my left is Dr. Cottrell. I said that right.
That's great.
Thank you. And immediately in front of me is Sean Reedy, the Sean. And over to my right is Jeremy Jackson. Okay, Dr. Cottrell, talk to us a little bit about what you do for Memorial Hermann and what your background is. Let's start there first.
Oh, how long do we have? Goodness.
You have about 30 seconds.
Okay, well, my role is the Director of Human Performance at the Ironman Sports Medicine Institute. I oversee all the human performance programming at our 5 Ironmans, plus I oversee sports science and education at our partner, Athlete Training and Health.
Uh-huh.
In that role, I oversee the strength conditioning staff, dietitians, human performance testing, physiologists, biomechanists, and a few athletic trainers. And we do return to play, we do sport performance programming, we do anybody training, we do employee wellness, we do tactical and SWAT team training, you name it, we do it all at the Ironman.
So anything that has
May
to
have
do,
possibly done that in 30 seconds.
he did.
That's
He did
phenomenal.
really. By the way, he
But I
did it
didn't
in
give
one
any
breath.
background. I
He
didn't,
did it in one breath.
One breath.
and I didn't do my
He's got a very
background.
large VO2 max.
Yeah, we do
so-
still have the background to go with.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Oh,
You haven't been
background's
breathing
on.
yet, have you?
I'm good. I
Okay,
can
so
all-
tell us about your educational background.
Educational background. So I did my undergraduate in kinesiology at University of Waterloo in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, if you know where that is. A very fine and esteemed program. And then I went on and did my master's degree at Northern Arizona University in exercise science. And there as a graduate assistant strength conditioning coach, I went on to a PhD in physiological sciences at University of Arizona. And I did a postdoc in physiological sciences at Queen's University. Then I moved on to a faculty position as a professor at Sheridan College, and there as a program, the athletic therapy degree program, and then I created a
This
new
was
degree
where in Canada?
in Canada, Brampton, Ontario, Canada. Created a new degree in kinesiology and health promotion, which I chaired for 8 years before coming down here.
It's pretty impressive. And how many publications do you have after now?
Publications, not many, 15.
Yeah.
15 publications. Yeah. So my role as professor, it was a teaching institute. So you could do research. They loved it if you did research, but you weren't required to do research. So we
How about
did
that?
a paper a year. It's pretty easy.
Yeah. I have myself and our clinical coordinator, Dr. Mark Knobloch, and Mark's PhD is in exercise science from University of Houston,
All right.
and his postdoc is at Baylor College of Medicine, and he's everything about muscle physiology.
Right on. My kind of guy.
Yeah, I think the two of you would.
Yeah, we talk
Sit in
muscle
the
all
corner.
day.
All right, so
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm transitioning.
in your presentation, you talked about you really controlled the room. And I was talking to Sean about this. I love that you had everybody line up. You had 4 lines of 5 or whatever it was. And you said, okay, at the same time, everybody's doing this because you were teaching movement. Right? Dylan was talking about educational leadership. And I when I'm teaching CPR, I do the same thing. All the mannequins are facing the same way. We're all doing the exact same thing at the same time. Talk a little bit about why you choose to do it that way and how that really helps.
Well, it's crowd control, really, right? It's crowd and quality control. Again, the model I was trying to demonstrate today is how do you teach a large group of individuals how to do a certain physical movement?
Mhm.
Specifically, it was catered towards a large group of high school or middle school people, which if you leave them at their own devices, it will get really hairy really quickly. The only way you can control movement skill in that environment with that many people and at the same time keep your eye on everybody is to have them coordinate each other using a tempo or using a command structure. That way I can look down the line and in one glance see out of the 5 people I'm watching, I can quickly see that 1 or 2 that are struggling. If they're all just going at their own pace, at their own time, I wouldn't be able to see anything. They would be all moving at different qualities and it'd be hard to correct. So you got to use, even when you're training people in the weight room, Not like I was doing more of a movement assessment, but when you're training people in the weight room and they're a new group, you have to start with that, even if it's an adult. If it's a large group of 20, or else you're just going to get a dog's breakfast of movement skill.
From my experience, probably where I would base that off of is working out of a weight room. In your strength background, obviously that's where you develop that, being able to watch down the line. And so I think a lot of athletic trainers, they don't have that because they're so hands-on with their patient instead of multiple, where in actuality, there's a lot of times where we'll have multiple patients. So can you expand on that a little bit more?
I work with a lot of athletic trainers. I have 2 staff members that oversee our return to play programs at the Ironmans. And there'll be situations.
One of them is Jamie Chauvin, right?
Yeah, Jamie Chauvin.
Yeah,
You'll be interviewing her later.
Yeah, and who's the other one?
Kate Como.
Mhm.
She was helping on stage.
Sure.
Yeah, so in return to play, the way the program's designed, it's a monthly fee, and people train in small group sessions. So they have 4 or 5 people. So it's a similar thing. Now imagine you have 4 or 5 people at different levels, different abilities, and a different injury. And you have to somehow maintain quality control in that environment. And so in those circumstances, sometimes you don't just go with the tempo, but you do it with controlled time. Instead of just counting reps, you do a controlled time, like 30-second on, minute off, or those sorts of things, or even a 20-second 10 Tabata type thing where you can really push them and observe the 3 or 4 people at the same time, give them recovery, let them rotate, and move on to the next exercise. And so there's a lot of different settings where you can get that crowd control. And it's essential that you just not let people say, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you go over here, you go over there, and just, okay, go. You got to have your eyes on everybody. You got to be standing in a position where you can watch everybody, especially in a clinic where it can be often crowded. You're working around physical therapists, which we do in our center. And so you got to figure out in the space that you have, where do you line people up so you can watch them all? How do you control what they're doing so you can have movement control and correct them on the fly?
So if I were to take your talk and I were to add some real world applications to what your talk was about and what you're talking about now, tell us some takeaways that you would have for some of your coaches, some of your athletes, and some of your parents. What are some key nuggets that they need to know?
Yeah, it's really simple. The nuts and bolts of my talk are: don't be in a rush with young athletes. Take 2 weeks, teach them how to lift, and you'll get lifetime of repayment and quality of lifting and quality of weight being moved. If you do not take those 2 weeks, you're going to be struggling with people doing poor technique and never maximizing their efficiency under the bar and never doing maximal weights. They'll always be compensating, always doing things wrong and not using the muscles that they should be using. If you watch any world level champion, powerlifter, Olympic lifter, strength athlete, and you watch their technique, there's a reason their technique's that way. It's not because we just decided one day that's the way it should be. It's because that's the most efficient way to move. So if we aren't making our athletes move with that kind of quality, we're limiting their ability to really pack on strength and power.
So really one of the things that we want to do with our young athletes is probably no weight, right? Everybody's so excited to get in the weight room, but let's start moving with body weight. And that seems to be a theme that's come across the table today.
Yeah, it was interesting after the talk, a fellow came up to me and said, well, is it safe for kids to lift weights? Well, walking is lifting weights. Going upstairs is lifting weights. There's just different levels of lifting weights, right? Strength is strength. And whether it's doing a push-up or a plank or a squat with a dowel on your back, it's still strength training. And so you can develop really effective strength training tools without using any weight. I can exhaust an average male in 10 minutes, not doing any kind of weight at all, just doing lunges and squats and even a glute bridge and a push-up and a body row. Boom, it's done. And so with young kids, you got to teach them how to use their body through their full range of motion, and with good movement quality, and the strength will adapt real quick. And then once it's there, then you can move them up.
Go ahead. You know what I was going to tell you, when I really started to get good at rehab was when I transitioned from a traditional athletic training clinic setting, and I was in the private sector for a little bit more in human performance. I did that for about 2 years. And that's where I really got good at rehab, because I started to understand this is really how the body works holistically. This is how it's working segmentally. This is how you start to put all the pieces together. This is what it looks like before they're injured, and this is what it looks like when they're injured, and this is what it looks like when they're after. So you've already got that conceptual framework happening in your mind, right? And so I think that anybody that's listening, if you are a practicing athletic trainer, going and getting more education and more training as a CSCS, as a CES, as a PES, anything you can do to learn more about how the body moves and understanding the physiological and biomechanical backgrounds. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Only one thing I was going to say there was the aspect that because I was standing there when you were talking about that individual. The one thing that I've seen in athletic trainers and physical therapists and anybody doing correcting movement and I think so many people want to throw on that weight so quick, or they want to add a different dynamic to it, want to put a person onto an unstable surface. They want to throw weight onto them. They want to add additional prior to actually creating that fundamental primal movement pattern of like a hip hinge or a lunge or a step up or a squat or a press, prior to actually learning true movement pattern.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So how do you utilize that, and how do you push those with your staff to, hey, you don't have to jump into throwing somebody in a squat. Let's learn to squat. Let's learn to move correctly.
Yeah, we have an education series that we put all our staff through. Our staff will go through a series of courses we have, and they're online and they're face to face, and we make them just all sit through it. And just like I gave a little rant today, that was a very small snippet of it. We make them sit through it and learn the techniques so they understand what the expectations are. And for some of them, they're going, oh, I kind of see it now. I see where you're going. I understand why you're going there. And so they end up going there. And what's interesting is with my staff, most of them do pretty good at a job at that now because we've given them the progressions and they're really disciplined with that. But then on the flip side of that is that sometimes in athletic training, then you get held back too long during correctives and they never get to loading. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. And with my staff, because now they're really good at correctives, and I think in general ATs are good at that because they're aware of the mechanics and the importance of it. Then when does it come time to actually now start loading instead of just standing on a wobble board and doing a lunge? When do you actually put a weight overhead?
So talk about that for a little bit. What are some of the outcomes that you're looking at before you go from a corrective exercise to a loading exercise? What kind of criteria do you want them to meet?
Yeah, so obviously the movement, can they perform the movement under body weight with control, repeated times, repeated sets? So they have the general physical capacity to get through repeated sets without fatiguing and compensating. And can they move right in the first place? As soon as I see the correct movement and I see they can do 2 or 3 sets with a decent volume, I load them. And some people say, well, are they ready? They're moving well. There's no pain. They're not getting fatigued. You have to stress the system. If you don't stress the system with something new, they're not going to adapt. They're not going to get bigger or get better. And one of the biggest limitations we find in our rehab environments, we have these kids for such a short period of time. We never get them to tolerate the loads that they should. Like if you're dealing with the loads occurring on the football field, even in a track athlete, if you look at elite track athletes, they're doing single leg bounds for 4 meters and stuff like that. It's just crazy the power that they have to produce with a single leg. Yet we get excited if a kid that we send out can do a single leg hop for 40 inches. And really in reality, that's not enough power. That's not the power they need. So it's important that as soon as they can move well and they have the capacity to tolerate that for repeated sets, that you start loading. It doesn't mean throw big weight on, but every workout.
So do you have a certain percentage of progressions that you like to follow?
Percentage load, you mean? Or no, it's there's every individual depends on what their ability is and how they're moving. And what I teach my coaches to do is use your eyes. You can see at the speed of the movement and the compensations that occur if they're ready to load more, just watching 1 rep. And in fact, our coaches, after watching 2 reps of an exercise, should know if they're going to actually achieve the reps you assign them or if you should pull the plug on it after shorter reps. You just develop a coach's eye. And that's based off bar velocity. You've probably heard a lot of velocity-based training is a big thing right now. Well, it's great to have a unit that you can put on your arm or on the bar to tell you how fast you're going. But really, if you're a good coach, you can just watch with your eyes. And you know after a couple of reps, are they going to get all 6 or 8, or are you going to cut them back? Because in reality, in a lot of these situations, you don't need them grinding out max reps. You don't need them going 10 out of 10 RPE. You don't need them, struggling up with that 4th and 5th rep. You need quality of control.
So in your mind, you'll terminate reps so that when you start to see them struggle, stop.
Oftentimes, if it's in an earlier rehab phase or a return to play setting where they haven't really loaded much yet, there's no reason to. There'll be time later on when you'll have a few cycles where you'll load them up like that, but you're still in return play. You're trying to maximize movement velocity. You're trying to maximize movement quality and not put them under more duress than they need to be in order to get back to their sport. Then once they're back you're playing ready? No. Okay, let's go through a phase and we'll grind out for a couple of weeks and then back it off.
The only thing I think of is I wish like every strength coach in the world had his mindset.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. And the understanding there too, from going from a rehab base or a rehab side of things to actually incorporating your GPP type stuff into that type of training, which I don't think enough of us do.
for those that are listening that don't know what GPP,
General physical preparedness
Mhm.
type
Uh-huh.
training. Sorry, I apologize.
no, don't apologize to me. But
But,
we have some
Words we
audience
throw
that,
around
yes.
here.
yeah, we have some audience members
so-
that don't know what you're talking about.
But adding that aspect into things in your rehab, in your beginning, because not everybody has that actual strength coach or strength movement. How from what you've seen can people add that? How can athletic trainers add that? How can you kind of guide them to, and how do you guide your staff to not only be focusing on the injury aspect, but on the, hey, this is the long-term goal of what we're trying to get
Yeah,
to?
it's pretty easy actually in my mindset. The general physical preparation is quite easy in the return to play setting because initially they can't load. You're worrying about movement quality, yes. They can't load much, so they're usually not that fatigued at the end of a set, depending on how long they've been off. And so it's as simple as just doing your supersets, trisets, circuits, tempoed sets, and you can develop movement quality. You can get a lot of volume in. You can get a lot of different exercises in, and at the same time build that exercise capacity. So if you're doing like a squat, push, pull as one of your trisets for your A circuit, and then you give them a little bit of recovery, and then you go a single leg or a hinge, push, pull again, or a single leg hinge and a pull, another pull exercise as your B circuit, and then your C circuit could be a little bit of a finisher, like you can put them on a prowler and do a sled push or a dummy drag or a battle rope, and that's your real conditioning circuit. None of that will be really heavy. None of that will put them in a situation where they're grinding reps.
Mhm.
Every one of those things will develop a metabolic tolerance to training, and at the same time learning a lot of things because you're doing so much volume. So we do that. Usually our return to play programs at earlier phases involve all those kinds of common
Mhm.
elements. Again, though, the problem is though sometimes the athletic trainer or physical therapist will get used to that program because it's fun, it's easy to do,
Mhm.
it's easy to push people through, but you never load, right? Because it's hard to develop load if you're doing any kind of superset. So at some point you got to flick that switch and say, okay, now we're going to lift for real.
Uh-huh.
We're going to do straight sets. We're going to do quality squats, quality cleans, quality hinge. And then we'll put a little bit of the more specific conditioning at the end. So now, because by then you're doing some sprints,
Mhm.
so do some repeated sprint conditioning or repeated agility conditioning, or we'll throw in some stairs or some prowler, that kind of thing. So it's more focused conditioning at the end. So that's usually how we allow our progression to occur in the loading and volumes.
See, to me, that's where it starts to get fun.
That's that aspect that you were just talking about, that, we need to get better at bringing those people in by going out and doing the research, looking at
Right.
learning how to help that strength coach, because even in the college setting, or even especially in the high school setting, but even in the college setting that I was in, you have that window, that gray
Mhm.
window of, all right, are they ready for play? Are they ready? We were lucky that we could kind of work them through, but I know that there's a lot of places that they don't have that ability to
Yeah,
generate
I
that.
think one of the biggest dangers that we see is that everybody has the potential to be siloed,
Mhm.
and that we have to work really hard to make sure that we're engaging what's called interprofessional education, that we're in the same, whenever we're dealing with the patient, client, or athlete, we've got all the healthcare providers at the table, whether that's going to be obviously there'll always be a physician, but whether it be a physician, athletic trainer, and a strength coach, a physician, physical therapist, athletic trainer, whoever it is, we're all at the same table. We're all talking because there are things that he's talking about that maybe I learned at some point in my curriculum, but that's not what I do every day now. And so we have athletic trainers that, like you and I were talking about before this started up. If I have an athletic trainer in a football setting, I look at it as the different settings, right? So an athletic trainer in a football setting to me represents emergency medicine. An athletic trainer in another setting may represent primary care medicine. You really represent, human performance and human development. So there are aspects that when you're talking, of course, physiologically, academically, I know what you're doing, but this is what I do every day. So let's make sure that we're talking, we're communicating, because at some point I need to know when to hand off to you and say, okay, go, oh, and by the way, if I am an athletic trainer in a secondary school setting, strength coaches. The strength coach is probably a football coach that has his degree in history.
Position coach.
Who used to
Yeah.
lift weights.
Who's lifted weights. And
Yeah. I
has
mean,
a-
this guy
Has big
played.
arms.
Yeah, this
Big
guy
arms.
played in the NFL for 2 years, and so he must know what he's doing. We'll put him in the weight room, and just because he's squatting, 400 pounds, well, hey, listen, I know you're 14, but throw that 400 pounds on. Let's see what you can do.
And that's funny because that's exactly what you were just talking about when we were standing in there after your talk, was actually that development. And so in those, I guess, lower level 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade kids, let's talk about how explain kind of what you were talking about, how you like to develop those. Some kids aren't ready for that movement. Some kids are.
Yeah, so yeah, he was basically, a fellow was challenged me and said, what age is it okay to start lifting weights? And basically I was saying, as long as they are mature enough and coachable enough, you can start doing resistance training anytime, because it's not really resistance training, it's physical literacy. It's learning how to use your body under different loads and different stresses and different positions. So again, push-up training or walking downstairs, is that weight training? No, in reality it is with some of these kids, because they're so weak that it provides the stress of that will strengthen them. And so when we're looking at young kids and their ability to progress their strength, knowing that it's probably a good idea for them, it's just a matter of looking at, are they interested in being in the weight room? And when they're in the weight room, can they focus long enough to actually develop some of the skills that you're trying to develop in the weight room? What's interesting is with some of them is I have a rule: never give up hope, because some strength coaches, they'll work with young kids and say, oh, it's just a waste of time. You'll be surprised, because all of a sudden, I've worked with these young kids, all of a sudden through puberty, a switch clicks, and I don't know why, and all of a sudden they can do it one day. One day, all of a sudden, everything changes, and the things you've been banging on for a year or two, all of a sudden they can move better. And I don't know why that switch turns on, but I've seen it happen.
It's exactly what happened to me. Growing up, I was always the smallest, and I'd be in the weight room and I'd see all my friends developing. They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I was a late bloomer. And I would just be in the gym. I couldn't figure out. I just wanted to bench 225, and all of a sudden puberty hit.
And every day you got stronger. Every day in the weight room.
By the time I really got done with my powerlifting, I mean, I was squatting over 500 and I was benching over 400, and it was like, what happened? I don't know. Just one day I took the bar off the rack and it managed to. I didn't feel like I was on a unicycle.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. No,
but
absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's but if they're in the weight room and they don't want to be there at all, and they can't control themselves, and maybe sometimes there's a learning limitation there, then you want to find other things that keep them active and healthy and enjoying life, whether that's jumping around or playing a sport. There's other ways you can develop physical literacy other than the weight room. It's just the weight room. The sooner you can get them in there moving well under load, the better it'll transfer later on. If you wait until they're 18 years old to get them in the weight room, you're really limited in what strength development you can have. It's really, I worked with Olympic wrestling program, and most of the athletes I started with barely touched a weight until they're 19, 20 years old. And it's a surprisingly hard in this very strength dominated sport to develop a lot of strength at that age, believe it or not, even though they're already in a strength sport such as wrestling. Whereas I can take a 14-year-old and in 2 years they can be squatting 400 pounds. Some of these 20-year-old wrestlers will never ever squat over 350 at a similar body weight. So it's kind of interesting.
That's just one of those things that I think that, we kind of run into that, people say, they just say too much, is that we've got, you shouldn't be squatting them. You shouldn't be having them lift weights because they're too young. And that's one of those things that I know Jeremy and I have talked on some different talks. I know Dr. Jan and I have talked on some different things. But I really like that aspect of getting people moving earlier, because they keep moving earlier and they learn to move in earlier.
And it's crazy, that mythology around weight training stunting growth. It's amazing how long that's lasted as a complete myth from the 1950s. And the hypotheses on which that's based have been disproven many, many times. Yet you'll hear it if you go into a room of parents and you're talking about the high school strength program about to run, and you ask them if they've heard that weight training is bad for their kids. And half of them will
stunt the growth. Yeah,
you
hear it all the time.
All the time.
Hear it all the time. And correct me if I'm wrong, it really came out of, at that point, the growth plates are open, and if we really overload it, then we can have some sort of crush injury. And there was one instance of that, and that's, all of a sudden the legend grew.
Yeah, that was one of them. Yeah, there's three trains of thought. One was that. One was they found that weightlifting increased the testosterone. They knew testosterone caused ossification of growth plates during puberty. So that was another hypothesis. And the third one was that they After World War II, they went into Japanese internment camps and they found these undersized children who were working in the mines carrying heavy loads every day. And these kids were incredibly small for their age. And so they figured it was the heavy loading that had stunted their growth.
Not the
Not the
malnutrition.
malnutrition.
yeah.
and
Not
all
the
that.
malnutrition, but the
Yeah,
heavy
exactly.
loading.
So those were the 3 lines, and all 3 of those lines have since been disproven.
Crazy.
One thing we
Yes,
don't
yes.
have a problem with now.
No malnutrition.
No,
Well,
correct.
yeah.
Right.
For here.
For the most part.
For the most part.
Depending
For
on
the
how you
most part.
define that, yeah.
For the most part.
All right. Well, I got to step away because I got to go take a phone call here. But before I go, I wanted to give you my card here.
Okay,
That's us,
awesome.
the University of Houston.
Yes,
Uh,
I've met you before.
Yeah,
like a
we
year
have.
ago.
We're networking here.
Yeah,
We're-
we're good.
And so what I want to do
I've
is
taught
that
courses for you. Did you know that?
I think I have.
No, I just guessed. I guess
What I want to do is I want to continue this conversation,
Mhm.
and I want to try to bring you into our program so you can have this conversation.
you
And in the meantime,
guys want to keep going?
I'll be back.
All right. Yeah, have a good chat. What else you guys got? Have anything interesting to
So-
chat about?
So I do. I have a question now.
Mhm.
So something else that I heard you talking about, and this is one thing that interests me quite a bit because I teach in a lot of this similar dynamic is depth of squat. I
Depth
heard
of
you.
squats,
I
yes.
heard you talking about that, and there are so many people, and I get this comment to me all the time. Oh well, you shouldn't go below parallel. It's terrible on your knees. It's going to tear up your knees. And I've heard the arguments. I've argued against the arguments for a long time. But give us your opinion on that because I know
Yeah,
I actually
so-
just heard your
Yeah,
opinion.
I've got a nice hour-and-a-half lecture just on the squat if you ever want to hear it. It's I think it's a pretty fun lecture. But yeah, so whenever someone says don't squat that deep, it's about your knees, the simple response is, oh really? What part of the knee? And let them explain to you what they think of the part of the knee. And most of them can't tell you. They just have heard somewhere that it's bad for your knees. And they'll start saying things like, well, there's shear and your meniscus, but they'll never be able to explain to you biomechanically why it's bad. And the simple follow-up is, well, yes, some would think that during a squat, it would cause excessive shears on the knees, which could put your ACL and PCL at risk. But research has shown that the shear forces acting on the knee during a squat lift, even under heavy load, is much less than that experienced in most sporting activities, such as running and jumping, and are within tolerable limits of the ligamentous structures as measured using cadavers and force dynamometers. And so in reality, the forces on the knee are quite tolerable if you are in good positions. Research has shown that as you get out of good positions, the shear forces on the knee go up, so that puts you at higher risk. They also show as you load more, the shear forces go up. You get to a certain amount of load, the compressive forces also go up, which seats the femur into the condylar ridge, I guess, and holds that
Which creates
that in
less
place,
shear.
which creates less shear, right? So it's pretty easy to have that discussion, but they may not hear you, right? And again, I said during my lecture that 25 years ago, I guess it's been, when we started giving these lectures to PT associations, and this is back in Arizona. My mentor, Richard Borden, was a physical therapist. He was the dean of the College of Health Professions that had a physical therapy program. We used to go on the Dog and Pony Roadshow and give these talks to PTs, and they were so upset to hear this. But we always asked them what part of the knee, and they couldn't tell us. And the only study showing ligamentous risk was that 1961 study by Carl Klein that showed increased knee varus and valgus laxity of weightlifters after the American Open. Are you familiar with that study?
Yes.
Yeah. And which he used this completely biased hypothesis with a completely biased manual test for knee laxity in a person that's just finished an athletic competition, and compared it to individuals who weren't even warmed up, and found increased laxity in two ligaments that aren't even under stress during a full squat. The LCL and MCL are not even under stress. They're at the bottom of the squat. So the study was flawed from start to end, but it was carried down through the generations so much that, again, it's like weightless training stunting your growth. It's just accepted. So what, again, for me, it's like saying, do you not want your elbow to go through a full range of motion when you're doing any kind of action? Do you not want your shoulder to go through a full range of motion doing any kind of throwing action? Do you not want your hip and knee to go through a full range of motion doing a squatting action? Why wouldn't you? Doesn't mean that everybody absolutely has to go through that range of motion all the time, every time they squat. There's some advantage to doing quarter squats. There's some advantage to doing half squats, some advantage to doing parallel squats, but there's also a lot of advantage to being able to teach a person to do a full squat below parallel or even Olympic squat under some load to develop strength in those positions. And like I said, it doesn't mean that everybody has to be there all the time, but you have created a good athlete if you have an athlete who can squat under load to a full squat position. And they can move a lot of things from that. If you have an athlete who can't do that, they're always going to be limited in something, if ever put in that range of motion. So you got to make that call. And but as I told the gentleman, I had an Olympic wrestler that I worked with, phenomenal athlete. He could not straighten his right elbow. He could not squat below a half squat, so about 90 degree at the knee, because of past injuries. And I didn't care. He was an Olympic level athlete. I trained around the dysfunction. I made him as strong as I could working with that. And there's a saying, a friend of mine said, many of phenomenal athletes have been developed through building strength upon dysfunction, which from an athletic trainer or a clinical perspective seems wrong. But if you've ever worked with NFL athletes, very few of them move really, really well. Right? Have you ever worked with,
Yes.
well, collegiate, if you're at University of Houston, working with some pretty good athletes there, few of them move very well, yet through building strength and power on top of that dysfunction, they did pretty good. They somehow found a way. Doesn't mean that you don't want to correct dysfunction. Doesn't mean that you can't do it. It's just that sometimes you just say, okay, we'll just go with what we have and try and make you as functional as possible and as strong and powerful as possible. Leave it at that.
All right. You talked about how your son is a competitive powerlifter at the age of 10.
Olympic weightlifter.
Olympic weightlifter, sorry.
Although he could powerlift, he just never has.
All right. So my son's at 6 and 4. Like instead of like us spanking him, we just all right. Well, you're gonna go do push-ups, or you do dead bugs, or you do mountain climbers, those kind of
moral
things.
dilemma there.
Right? And so with those, I mean, my 4 and my 6-year-old. One of the things I heard you say was, if they're mentally competent and aware of their body, then they can begin to lift weights. And you've actually asked people to, like 8-year-olds or 10-year-olds, not to come into your weight room because they're not mentally competent of their body. So am I doing a disservice to my children by having them do push-ups at 6 and 4 for discipline, or is it okay to allow them to kind of do that on their own and learn that, see what it feels like?
Well, I think there's two parts to that question. One is exercise, a disciplinary measure. Some psychologists say, well, what you're doing is you're teaching them that exercise is a bad thing because you discipline them with exercise and they should not look forward to exercise or whatever. I do that with my kids. I force my kids to work out sometimes too. They don't want to work out. My son, actually, he's a pretty good weightlifter and he moves really well. But you ask him if he enjoys training, he says, no, I don't really like training. And he's been doing it now for 4 years. And, what motivates me? Well, I want to get stronger and I want to look pretty. And, that's why he trains, right? As do most of us, right? So, with your kid, are you doing them a disservice? That's more of a parenting and a psychology question than a training question. My question to you is, when the kids do it, do they get excited about doing it? Are they, does their father model it? Do you train in front of them? Do you exercise in front of your kids?
Yeah, I do it at the house. I go do push-ups and, I take them up to the weight room. And a lot of the times what ends up happening is they're climbing on the equipment while I'm working out, but they're there with me. And, a lot of times I'm like, all right, guys, you got to get your
come here and do that. Yeah, do these two things.
That's right. These things in, and then now you can go play.
So that is, to me, the best way to get young children comfortable with, again, physical literacy or weight room culture. And my kids, my daughter, when she was a year and a half, I was coach of the weightlifting team at the University of Arizona. And she was in the weight room every day when I was coaching in her little car chair at first. And then when she was toddling, she'd toddle around. And my daughter, from the age of 8 years old, has been comfortable in the weight room. So how many girls are comfortable in the weight room? My daughter, now at age of 17, could walk into any weight room anywhere in the world and be comfortable training. Not with machines, with free weights, doing clean and jerks and snatch and squats and that kind of thing. And so I think with young kids, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to develop this comfort that training's good. It's something everybody should do. It's easy to do. You've got the power to do it. Now go do it. And to me, that gives a lifetime of learning to a kid. And that's one of my big stories today is most of these kids that you're working with in grades 7, 8, they're not going to go on to anything athletic. But they are going to spend the rest of their life trying to be healthy. And if you can teach them how to move well and not injure them, they can spend a lifetime of health. But if you don't teach them to move well and you hurt them, they're going to spend the rest of their life in pain. Right?
I will say my 2-year-old does say, Daddy, can I do push-ups?
Yeah, exactly.
So like if one of the older one gets in trouble, then He said,
Yeah.
can I do them too? Sure,
Yeah.
buddy, you can do jumping jacks.
Modeling's critical. They got to see the parents that are interested in that. And if you're interested, they're interested, and then it's not a negative thing.
I'll go off of that. I mean, coming up with my father, probably some of my greatest memories are going back, and probably the reason that I went in the direction that I did was because he liked to move. He liked to be active. In his 80s, or in his 70s, he was active. He was moving. He was always doing stuff, and that was kind of something that, like you said, Jeremy, that you have them do. Well, I would have them do, or I would do with him, and I think that's probably why I went on and went into a movement profession and went in and really liked assessing and really like doing and stuff like that. And probably some of my best memories are from that.
Yeah,
So
it's great bonding experience for sure.
Good. All right. So Dr. Cottrell, my brother-in-law is actually, his last name is Cottrell. The head coach at Houston Baptist University was Ron Cottrell or Cottrell.
I have an uncle, Ron Cottrell. So.
Is that the same guy? Huh?
No, it's not the same guy.
All right. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, find out more.
Oh, geez. So I am the director of human performance at the Ironman Sports Medicine Institute. You can go to our website, ironman.memorialhermann.org. My email is trevor.cottrell@memorialhermann.org. Do you want me to spell it out?
It's 2 T's, 2 R's, 2 L's.
Something like that, but trevor.cottrell at Memorial Hermann. It's memorialhermann.org. So shoot me an email and we can chat all day.
You cheated us, man. You didn't spell out the word.
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry.
Now-
I Google it.
All right. And then obviously Dr. Yellen left, but Sean Reedy.
Well, I have one question for you.
Oh,
Now
yeah,
you do no, it's more so on the contact. Athletic training and health, correct?
Athlete training and health.
Athlete training and health. Sorry,
Yeah.
follows through with under you, correct, as well?
Yeah, so I oversee the sports science and education, some of the programming at Athlete Training and Health, which is a private performance training facility that has, caters to mostly amateur athletics, so high school age, but also has college NFL combines. It has the college off-season programming, NFL off-season programming, Major League Baseball off-season programming. And then it has an adult fitness and employee wellness, tactical wellness. We work with SWAT athletes and firefighters, that sort of thing as well.
And I'll just throw out there that I follow them on Instagram and some of the social media stuff, and I really like some of the stuff that
What is
they
that?
put out. And,
Athlete Training and Health, ATH. If you do Athlete Training and Health on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Yeah, they do a pretty good job. We have an education, little 2-minute educational clips we put out, mostly for parents, but you can see some of the program that goes on. And it's sometimes it'll link you to other educational resources as well. I'm on Twitter and Facebook, not that active, but you can follow me there, and I repost things that I'm interested in, basically.
Very good. Well, I have been thoroughly impressed with not just your knowledge, but your ability to share it. So thank you for what you did here at the Sports Medicine Update today, and then also joining us here on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a great day. Really appreciate it, guys.
thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Good stuff, guys.
Yeah, that was good. I'm just really sad that I missed out on the majority of the front end of the talk.
You didn't see my rant?
Yeah,
Oh, it's
I
a bit
didn't
of a
get, I didn't get to see it.
It was an angry one.